He was a middle-aged man looking for Ms. Right.
He was a great person. You can ask anybody.
She was a single mother searching for a fresh start.
Just trying to make a living for herself and for her children.
From the moment these two lonely hearts met, sparks flew.
He said it was just like love at first sight.
But just when their steamy love affair seemed destined for new heights,
He was starting to talk about marriage.
a shocking crime would bring their lives crashing back down.
There's blood everywhere. It's just really a gruesome, gruesome scene.
But who was behind this vicious crime? A desperate search for the assailant unearths a scandal from the past and proves one of these starry-eyed lovers wasn't who they claimed to be.
I call it the scarlet letter that she wears that'll always haunt her.
April 3rd, 2011, 2:30 a.m. It's a warm spring morning in the college town of Durham, North Carolina. But at an apartment complex on the south side of the city, trouble is brewing. It starts when resident Carlos Wilson is jolted awake by someone knocking on his sliding glass door.
Carlos!
Peering outside, he sees his neighbor and beloved uncle, 46-year-old Reginald Day.
Reginald was at the door. I open it and immediately I see him bleeding and gasping for air.
Oh man, oh my God, what happened to you?
To Carlos's horror, it appears his uncle has been stabbed in his side.
I was hysterical, but I tried to keep Reggie calm. I held his wound, made the 911 call.
911, where's your emergency?
I need an ambulance to Century Oaks Drive, and my uncle just got stabbed.
Is he awake?
Yeah, but he needs help bad.
Police and paramedics are on the scene within minutes.
Hey man, what happened?
Oh man, he got stabbed.
Mr. Day was bleeding heavily from a wound right under his armpit.
Attempting to staunch his blood loss, they immediately transport Reggie to a nearby trauma center.
They proceeded to take him immediately to Duke Medical Center, where he was operated on by the emergency personnel.
With Reggie in surgery and his fate uncertain, officers try and ascertain what had transpired.
Tell us what happened.
Speaking to Carlos Wilson, they learn that Reggie lives in a nearby apartment with his 32-year-old girlfriend, Crystal Mangum, and her 3 children.
Where's Crystal and the kids now?
I don't know.
Officers race to Reggie and Crystal's apartment. There's no sign of Crystal or her kids, but what they find is deeply disturbing.
We're gonna need to call for backup.
Go ahead and advise major crimes and x-ray.
It's as if a tornado was in the inside of the apartment.
We have knives and weapons all over the floor.
When detectives arrive, it doesn't take them long to see that there's been some sort of struggle.
First thing they see are knives everywhere. Knives on the couch, broken knives, blade here, a handle there.
They called in forensics, the SBI, and the rest of them to take pictures to test the knives and things like that.
They could tell that something very violent and something very aggressive had happened.
Interviewing neighbors, investigators discover there were sounds of an altercation coming from the apartment earlier that evening.
Arguing and fighting.
But that's not all.
And there was another voice, and it was a male.
They heard a third voice, and this was a mystery voice. Nobody knew who this voice belonged to.
But who is this mystery man? And more importantly, where is Reggie's girlfriend, Crystal Mangum?
They didn't know a whole lot at that point, so there were certainly a lot of questions.
But when police start digging for answers, they strike a nerve with everyone in the city of Durham and unearth a scandal involving a prestigious university. A scandal folks in Durham thought they'd buried for good.
See Crystal Mangum?
See Crystal Mangum.
Born and raised in Durham, and the youngest of 3 children, Crystal Gail Mangum never strove to be the center of attention.
Crystal is really a kind-hearted, good person. Kind of quiet demeanor, not some loud, boisterous, outspoken person.
Bright and pretty, Crystal did well at Durham's Hillside High School until a traumatic event threw her life off course.
There was a gentleman older, much older than she was, that took interest in her and at some point assaulted her. She ended up in a relationship that she shouldn't have been in. It would have been statutory rape. There were charges pressed, but the parents were encouraged to not pursue the case, so those charges were dropped.
Ironically, her own father indicated that he didn't believe that it was true. So we're talking about your parents, the people that you expect to support you, and they're the very first people that are saying, no, I don't believe you, Crystal.
Anxious for a new start, Crystal was determined to put as much space as she could between her and her hometown. So after high school, she joined the Navy.
Crystal was trained as a radar specialist. They sent her to California. She ended up on one of their boats, the USS Mount Hood.
But Crystal's naval career was cut short after an embarrassing affair with a married naval officer resulted in 2 children. Though Crystal received an honorable discharge, she ended her affair with the officer and abruptly returned to Durham with her children. Crystal went back to school and earned a degree in criminal psychology. But even with a diploma in hand, the single mother was struggling to make ends meet.
She still had a very hard time finding employment.
By 2010, Crystal had weathered another failed relationship and had a 3rd child to support.
She was living with her aunt, and, it was a crowded situation.
But in January of 2011, Crystal's run of bad luck took an unexpected turn when she met a successful 46-year-old residential painter named Reginald Day.
They met when he came to the house where she lived at to do a paint job.
What's your name?
I'm Crystal.
Hey, nice to meet you, Reggie.
He was a loving friend, and he was a great person. He had a shirt off his back.
Reggie had a wide network of friends in Durham, but he'd never found the woman of his dreams.
Uncle was very depressed about not having to wake up to someone. He wanted a wife and kids. He was looking for love.
By the time Reginald Day had finished his paint job, he and Crystal had formed a connection.
I just got a big empty apartment by myself.
By yourself?
He was behind on rent, and Crystal had some money saved up, and she let him know that I can help you catch it up if you allow me to, move in.
Reggie jumped at the opportunity. Just 3 weeks later, Crystal and her children moved into Reggie's apartment. It didn't take long for the sparks to start flying.
They just kind of fell into a relationship. She said one night they were just sitting there talking, watching TV, having a few drinks, and, things happen.
So the kids sleep?
Yeah, I put them in bed.
It became romantic and, eventually crossed a threshold.
A devoted boyfriend, 3 adoring children, a good home. By the spring of 2011, it seemed Crystal Mangum was finally living the life she'd always imagined.
He was a really good man to her, and she cared about him a lot. He was starting to talk about marriage, even though they had been together for just a couple of months.
But just when Crystal and Reggie's whirlwind romance seems destined for the altar, another storm begins to brew. A storm that would rip the roof off their relationship, exposing a closet full of skeletons. For lovers, Crystal Mangum and Reggie Day, the spring of 2011 wasn't just a chance to celebrate the end of another long winter. It also marked the 6-week anniversary of their whirlwind romance.
Reggie had a ready-made family
2011,
in about
their
a
lives
week of
took...
knowing her.
But in the early morning hours of April 3rd, 2011, their lives took a tragic turn when a blood-soaked Reggie shows up at his nephew's apartment, the victim of an apparent knife attack.
It was very traumatic for me to witness that to your own family member.
Reggie is rushed to a nearby hospital where surgeons have gone missing from the couple's nearby. Meanwhile, officers have just discovered that Crystal and her 3 children have gone missing from the couple's nearby apartment.
She was gone. They needed to find Crystal wherever she was at.
Adding to the mystery, neighbors have reported hearing an argument, along with the voice of an unknown
Police
male
needed
that
to know
seemed to be
if he-
coming from inside the apartment earlier in the evening.
At that point, police needed to know if he was involved and who he was and what was he doing there.
While detectives expand their search for Crystal that might offer the unidentified man, investigators scour her and Reggie's apartment in search of any evidence that might offer clues about the attack.
There was knives on the couch. There was knives in the bedroom. There was knives in the hallway. There was blood trails in the hallway.
Near one of the bloodstains, investigators find a clump of human
kitchen
hair,
knife, maybe
along
about
with a weapon
6
that
inches.
appears to have been used in the attack on Reggie.
The knife was just an ordinary kitchen knife, maybe about 6 inches long.
After tagging the evidence, detectives continue into the master bedroom.
They saw the mattress off the bed and that it had some blood on it.
The whole frame of the door was off, and there was a big hole in the middle of the door. That had to take force.
It's obvious to investigators that a fight had taken place in the apartment, but it's unclear who inflicted the damage and why. Though investigators have a hunch that the instigator of this attack is male.
Men are generally naturally can be more aggressive than women.
Could this be a domestic dispute gone horribly wrong? Or is there something much darker at hand? With an unknown man still at large, police aren't certain. As for Reggie's friends and family who've gathered outside the apartment, they find it impossible to believe that someone could have targeted Reggie on purpose, or that he himself was involved in some sort of domestic assault.
I never witnessed any violent behavior
last-
from Reggie in any of his relationships.
He was just truly amazing. He would give you his last dime. He was just a good person.
Reggie's friends and family tell police that just hours earlier that evening, Reggie and Crystal had attended a party for one of his relatives.
Amazing time at a party.
It was a birthday party for a cousin of mine.
Crystal and Reginald were having an amazing time at a party. They were drinking, having fun, letting loose.
As far as friends could tell, the couple had never seemed happier.
They weren't fighting at the party. They weren't fighting en route to the party.
While no one knows what happened after the couple returned home, stranger to controversy. Friends and family are quick to remind police that the woman at the center of Reggie's love life was no stranger to controversy.
Who's his girlfriend?
Crystal Mangum, the Crystal Mangum.
I explained to that was the Crystal Mangum.
In Durham, most people know who Crystal is.
In fact, 5 years earlier, Crystal had been involved in a scandal that rocked Durham and prestigious Duke University to its core.
The Duke lacrosse scandal was something that was heard nationally, not something that was just isolated to North Carolina.
It all started one night in March of 2006, when Crystal and another woman attended a party for Duke's varsity men's lacrosse team,
or dance,
but not as guests.
Crystal was being hired to strip or dance for the Duke lacrosse players.
It was a job the single mother had secretly been doing on and off since 2002.
I go dance for a couple of hours. That's $400 or $500 you put in your pocket. You got children, you got bills. I go dance for a couple of hours. I go home.
But according to a statement Crystal filed with police the following morning, the party went terribly awry.
The lacrosse team had ordered specifically Caucasian strippers. In return, they receive an African American
lacrosse
and an
players
Asian
weren't
stripper.
happy.
Wait a minute. No touching, pretty boy.
No, we paid.
Crystal alleged the lacrosse players weren't happy, and an argument ensued, during which time she and the other woman were called racial slurs. But that wasn't the most shocking charge Crystal brought against the team.
Raping her, accused the Duke lacrosse members of sexually raping her.
Specifically, Crystal claimed she'd been violated by 3 Duke players. Within days, the Durham district attorney brought charges against the young men. Durham exploded.
You have a young black lady saying that 3 white guys raped her. The whole town was divided.
Half of them believing that something did happen and
got national attention,
but the other half angry.
The case got national attention, but as the investigation unfolded, private detectives hired by the accused players began to poke holes in Crystal's story. They discovered major discrepancies between what she told police and the evidence CSI uncovered.
The evidence did not back up her story that she was raped.
The Attorney General publicly said there wasn't enough evidence to pursue this case and that he was declaring that the young men were innocent.
The whole town was embarrassed by how it turned out.
After her allegations proved false, Crystal became a pariah in Durham.
She thought that everything would be okay. I go find a job, good job. That didn't happen.
Once they found out she was a young lady involved with the Duke Lacrosse, they would fire her.
Crystal's past certainly raises questions about her potential involvement in the attack on Reggie. But the most pressing issue for investigators is, where is Crystal now?
They were looking for her and her 3 children.
But before police could pinpoint the whereabouts of Crystal and her children, detectives would get help from an unlikely source, catapulting this disturbing case in a stunning new direction.
And what is your name, please? Please just hurry up and get here. It really is a lot of trouble, and we just need you to get here really seriously.
April 3rd, 2011. April 3rd, 2011. Shortly after attending a family party, 46-year-old Reggie Day was brutally stabbed in the abdomen. After investigating Reggie's apartment, Durham police are now looking for his girlfriend, a woman involved in one of the city's most notorious scandals.
This was the Crystal Mangum, the same Crystal Mangum at the center of the Duke Lacrosse controversy.
While Reggie fights for his life at Duke Medical Center, police are racing to find Crystal,
Someone else was in the house.
as well as a mysterious man neighbors claim they heard shortly before the attack.
Well, someone else was in the house. Did someone else commit this crime? Was a child involved?
If there was a 3rd person in the apartment at that time, there's really no way of knowing what happened.
But as police work to determine the other man's identity, a 911 dispatcher receives a disturbing emergency call.
Durham 911, where's your emergency?
This man was trying to beat up on my mom, and my mom was trying to defend herself, and she accidentally stabbed her.
Okay, and what is your name, please? Please.
The number is listed to a Durham resident. Concerned, dispatchers immediately trace the call. They discover the number is listed to a Durham resident named Liddy Howard. And the address is less than a block away from Reggie's apartment. Racing to the scene, police converge outside Liddy Howard's residence. Officers make a stunning discovery.
Ma'am, we're responding to a 911 call.
When they step into the living room, officers make a stunning discovery.
They come in, and Crystal Magnum was laying on the living room floor.
Crystal, I need you to look up at me and talk to me.
They called out to her, and she didn't respond, almost like she was asleep.
Crystal, can you stand up?
Inquire about the welfare of her children.
She was just out of it.
Having finally found Crystal, officers inquire about the welfare of her children. Fortunately, they're all okay. In fact, Crystal's son is the one who placed the 911 call.
Miss Howard was caring for Crystal's 3 children that night. She didn't live very far away.
Police ask Liddy Howard about while first responders attend to a dazed and seemingly traumatized Crystal Mangum. Police ask Liddy Howard about the events of the evening. She explains Crystal had dropped off her kids earlier before leaving for Reggie's party.
Was she okay when she dropped the kids off?
She was fine when she dropped the kids off.
She walked through the door.
And, she came home around 4 a.m. and she looked like she had been in a fight.
She walked through the door. She said, Red just hit her. Just hit her.
She was distraught. She was in tears. She basically said her boyfriend was beating her and she stabbed him.
She was claiming self-defense, that he had beat her up.
But when police examine Crystal, they see no blatant signs of physical injury. They ask Crystal to describe Reggie's attack on her, but a seemingly groggy Crystal has trouble answering their questions.
She's stumbling over her words. The officers had to keep asking her questions. She was falling asleep. She was maybe stumbling over her words or asking, where am I?
Officers transport Crystal to police headquarters for further questioning. But even after arriving at the station, Crystal offers up little information.
I need you to tell me exactly what happened.
Look, I am in pain.
To say anything
Crystal
else, complains of turning her face and arm where she says Reggie attacked her. but she refuses to say anything else without an attorney present.
Crystal, who unfortunately had experience with the legal system, did what every defense lawyer in the world would advise, which is not talk.
Right now, I need you to tell me exactly what happened.
I'm not gonna say nothing until I talk to my lawyer.
They took pictures of her, the condition that she was in, the condition that her clothes was in.
Beginning to think
was there
Crystal
any
is
blood
hiding
on
something.
her? Was there any marks, apparent marks on her?
Detectives are beginning to think Crystal is hiding something. They hold her in an interrogation room, but they have little concrete evidence connecting her to the crime. That is, until they receive a call from the officers back at the couple's apartment. A surprising new witness has come forward.
With them to make it clear
Durham
that he had
police
been there.
officer Christopher King.
He somehow communicated with them to make it clear that he had been there earlier that night.
Officer King tells investigators that he'd been at the couple's apartment complex around 2 a.m., overseeing the towing of an abandoned vehicle. That's when he encountered Crystal and Reggie returning home from their family party.
As a police officer,
Hey,
she knew.
How you doing?
She recognized him as a police officer. She knew, and she went over to the car.
Crystal said hi to him, which apparently set Reggie off on a jealousy issue.
Insults, and he was like,
he started
cheating
yelling.
on me.
All I know is, who is this dude you talking to?
He was cursing and hurling insults, and he was like, you're cheating on me.
All I know is every time I turn my back, you always talking to another guy.
You are seeing insecurity.
You need to take that in the house. Take that on in.
Tone it down, and you got to take it inside.
The police officer said, you two need to take that in the house. Take that on in the house. And that's what they did.
For detectives, it's a stunning turn of events.
When detectives interviewed
Perhaps
the officer,
Crystal
they
is telling the
realized
truth
that he
about
was
being
the third
assaulted.
voice.
And if Officer King's statement is accurate, perhaps Crystal is telling the truth about being assaulted by Reggie. But how did Reggie end up on the wrong end of a bloody steak knife? Had Crystal stabbed him in self-defense? Or had she or someone else attacked Reggie in cold blood? Unfortunately, Officer King can shed little light on what transpired after he left the scene.
From the time they got in the house, it becomes a he said, she said story because the only people who were there to speak on that was Reggie and Crystal.
With Crystal refusing to speak with police, detectives know the only person who can shed light on what really happened is Reggie Day. Unfortunately, Reggie's condition is about to take a dramatic turn. One was that gives investigators pause and makes them wonder. In this bloody encounter, who was the predator? And who was the prey?
He said he kicked the door in on the bathroom and dragged her out by the hair.
After weathering a very public dispute. After weathering a very public dispute over the Duke lacrosse allegations, Crystal Mangum was looking for a fresh start,
she needed to get her life.
and a man who could love her despite her checkered past. She found that man in Reggie Day.
After that Duke lacrosse fiasco, Crystal decided that after all of that, she needed to get her life back on track.
I was like, oh, wow, for real? Do you know who this girl is? He told me, yeah, Nip, everybody need a second chance.
But has Reggie's kindness
holding
toward
his
Crystal
wound.
ultimately done him in? In the early morning hours of April 3rd, 2011, Reggie showed up at his nephew's house with a gruesome stab wound.
Reggie was standing before me, holding his wound, his frail body.
Reggie grabbed her.
He told me Crystal stabbed him.
Crystal claims no knowledge of the stabbing and instead tells police that Reggie had assaulted her.
Crystal said conflict became physical. Reggie grabbed her, he held her down.
I need to talk to my lawyer.
At that point, she had exercised her right to an attorney.
Police are desperate to hear Reggie's version of events. But with Reggie fighting for his life at Duke Medical Center, they're worried they might never get the chance. Fortunately for detectives, shortly after Reggie underwent surgery, they received word that his condition has stabilized. He's conscious, but in a lot of pain.
And obviously, there's a knife wound in the side, and they did note a small cut in his colon, which they repaired, and they repaired some damage to a few other organs.
Later that morning, Reggie's finally strong enough to share his story with police.
Reggie, I'm the detective investigating your case. Could you tell us what happened to you while you ended up here in the hospital?
Okay. Well, we were at my cousin's party, and things were just fine. What's up, cuz?
Being a little flirtatious and rather.
Reggie says that he and Crystal were both drinking that evening. But as the night progressed, he began to wonder if Crystal was having too much fun.
He felt that Crystal was being a little flirtatious and rather disrespectful to him.
By 2 a.m., when they arrived back at their apartment complex, tensions were running high. That's when they ran into Durham police officer Christopher King. It's then that Reggie drops a bombshell. He tells police that in the weeks leading up to the party, he'd heard rumors Crystal had been cheating on him.
He had been hearing from neighbors about Crystal sneaking men in the house during the day when he was at work.
3 children.
Reggie says seeing Crystal flirting with another man on the heels of his family get-together was more than he could bear.
He felt, well, I've opened up my home to Crystal and her 3 children, welcomed them in, taking care of them, and this is how she repays me.
You are so crazy and insecure.
I'm crazy?
Yeah,
I'm crazy. Every time I turn around, you're talking to some strange dude.
Hey, you ought to go to tone it down, and you got to take it inside.
The police officer asked the 2 of them to take their problems into the home. Shortly after they got into the home, a fight ensued.
Reggie claims that inside their apartment, he told Crystal she needed to move out immediately.
You know what?
What?
You can get out right now. Right now.
He says she ignored him and locked herself in the bathroom.
She got her phone and she tried to call somebody to come pick her up so she could leave the apartment. He wasn't having it.
Reggie acknowledges he was enraged and might have taken things a little too far.
He grabbed her by the...
Hey, I need for you to come pick me up. Reggie is going crazy. Just come on, hurry up, please.
All right, you talking to somebody on the phone?
Reggie admits to breaking the door down.
He grabbed her by the hair and was trying to pull her out. Come on.
To detectives, it sounds like Reggie was the aggressor in the apartment. At that point, if Crystal is indeed the one who stabbed him, she's got a pretty clear-cut case of self-defense. But Reggie claims that once they were outside the bathroom, he let Crystal go. At that point, it was Crystal who then became the aggressor.
He gave them a clear-cut description that Crystal is the one that was trying to kill. They went into a rage of violence, and the next thing you know, he was defending himself because she became enraged.
She goes to my uncle's kitchen. She picked up that knife.
Don't ever touch me again. Don't put your hands on me. Don't put your hands on me.
He said he was going to leave.
And calls into question the notion of self.
She stabbed him before he could.
They said, she just stabbed me. She just got crazy. She stabbed me.
Given the location of Reggie's wound, his story of the attack makes sense and calls into question the notion of self-defense, as does Crystal's lack of bruising or other injuries indicative of an attack against her.
She had no bruises to say that Reggie was beating her. All Reginald wounds looked defensive. That's he was trying to flee, get away. You know, they was in his back, on his side.
Still, police need more evidence before they can move forward with assault charges against Crystal.
She was being detained, which is a normal procedure in the law enforcement arena, so that the crime scene investigators could go back to the crime scene, get whatever kind of evidence they need.
Specifically, investigators are focusing on the slew of knives found scattered around the apartment. Police can only reach one conclusion. Crystal must have placed them there before fleeing the scene.
There was knives in areas that really did not seem that you should have a knife. It appeared that the crime scene may have been tampered with.
When coupled with Crystal's apparent lack of injuries, the fact that the crime scene had been tampered with gave investigators the ammunition they needed to throw the book at Crystal Mangum.
I was crushed.
She was charged with assault with a deadly
believe
weapon, intent to kill, inflicting serious injury.
While news of Crystal's arrest is met with relief from Reggie's family, her friends can't believe the turn of events.
I was crushed. I just couldn't believe it. I was mortified.
But before Crystal can get her day in court, this case would take yet another dark and sensational turn. One that would not only leave a community grasping for answers, but would also thrust Crystal Mangum back onto Durham's center stage once again. While Reggie admits losing his temper less than 48 hours after the near-fatal stabbing of Durham resident Reggie Day, police have arrested his 32-year-old girlfriend, Crystal Mangum. While Reggie admits losing his temper with Crystal, the location of his knife wound, coupled with a doctored crime scene, and Crystal's apparent lack of injuries has prompted prosecutors to charge Crystal with assault with intent to kill.
He said he was going to leave, but she stabbed him before he could.
After emergency surgery, Reggie appears to be on the mend.
Difficult decision to take him off of
So
life
it comes as a shock when just a few short days after Crystal's arrest, Reggie's condition takes a turn for the worse.
He was in a coma, and unfortunately, his family had to make the difficult decision to take him off of life support.
I gotta see my uncle again.
After being taken off life support, Reggie passes away.
I said, what? I said, I just talked to him yesterday.
And I was like, nah, man, I gotta see my uncle again. I can't see, I'm not gonna have the last memory of him bending over, gasping for air in my head.
Reggie's passing also means prosecutors will up the charges against Crystal Mangum.
The medical examiner stated that he died due to complications due to a stab wound. And because of that, Crystal Mangum was charged with Reginald Day's murder.
Past transgressions. The charges carry a maximum sentence of life in prison. But some in the community can't help but wonder if Crystal is being prosecuted less for the attack on Reggie Day and more as punishment for her past transgressions.
She wears the scarlet
because you are Crystal Mangum. You know, everything she does has been put under a microscope. You can't have a relationship with somebody, and if you do, if they decide to abuse you, you must let them abuse you because you are Crystal Mangum. That's what has been put upon her, and that's not fair to her.
And it's under that cloud of angst and suspicion that Crystal's trial finally begins on November 14th, 2013. Once again, the Durham community finds itself divided.
You had Reginald's family sat in on one side. You had some of Crystal's supporters sitting on the other, and a whole bank of reporters in the back.
In opening arguments, prosecutors assert that on April 3rd, 2011, Crystal and Reggie engaged in a heated argument inside their apartment. And when Reggie tried to defuse the situation by leaving the scene, Crystal lashed out in violence.
They were fussing about her dating other men. She went to the kitchen, got a knife, and stabbed him.
To support their claim, prosecutors highlight Reggie's hospital statement, along with the lack of visible injuries to Crystal Mangum's body.
She had no wounds on her where she had been hit. It don't take a rocket scientist to see what happened. She got into an aggressive state, didn't like something that went on, and stabbed Reginald.
Prosecutors only briefly reference the Duke lacrosse scandal, they do zero in on another dark secret of Crystal's, one that could bolster their theory that Crystal had a propensity for violence. Prosecutors call to the stand an ex-boyfriend named Milton Walker, who recounts a bizarre incident that took place less than a year before the attack on Reggie Day.
I saw you in this state! I should just jump you, bro! Just take your hands off me! Don't you ever put your hands on me again!
She put some of his clothes in the bathtub and said, willing to become physical, and was screaming that she was going to kill him. It indicated that she had a terrible temper and that she was willing to become physical.
Crystal felt like
during an altercation.
But as defense attorneys are quick to point out, in both that case and this one, Crystal had no choice but to meet force with force.
Well, I think that Crystal felt like at this point, you know,
the woman at the center of this controversy
at least tried to tell what happened because she was there. Only her and Reginald know.
Finally, after much anticipation, the woman at the center of this controversy takes the stand. Crystal recounts how their argument escalated in the early morning hours of April 3rd.
I punched her. She said that when they got back in the house, he was screaming at her.
You were talking to that dude out there.
Hey,
I saw you flirting with
him. I'm not flirting with anybody.
He said Mr. Day punched her repeatedly, knocked her down.
Crystal says she fled to the bathroom.
He went to the...
But Reggie kicked in the door and dragged her out by her hair. Retreating to their back bedroom, Crystal says she was stunned by what happened next.
according to Crystal. He went to the kitchen and got knives.
I got something for you.
On her, he was on
Started
top
throwing
of her.
them at her, and she was hiding behind the mattress, which was flipped up.
Oh, so you want to talk to another man?
She said that at that point, when he grabbed her again and he was on her, he was on top of her, trying to choke her.
She reached around on the floor, found one, and reached up and stabbed him. Woman, I think she presented her case.
For those hearing Crystal's story for the first time, it's a convincing tale.
She did a good job on the stand. She's an intelligent woman. I think she presented her case.
But prosecutors fire back and say Crystal's story about Reggie throwing knives is all a figment of her imagination.
There were no knife marks in the mattress that she was supposedly hiding behind.
The prosecution's theory was that she had staged it and she placed the knives where they were just to make like it was more damage and harm done than actually was.
While the forensic evidence contradicts Crystal's version of events, her defense team reminds jurors that it was Reggie, not Crystal, who initiated their fatal encounter.
She tried to get away by going into a locked bathroom. Reggie kicked the door down, went in there, grabbed her by the hair, and drug her out. But at the end of the day, if someone kicks in a door to get at you and is dragging you by the hair, generally you would have a right to respond.
But as this case nears its conclusion, there is one more shocking allegation still to be made. And it might be the saving grace Durham's most controversial resident has been looking for all along. November 14th, 2000. November 14th, 2013. More than 29 months after single mother Crystal Mangum stabbed her boyfriend Reginald Day during an argument, her first-degree murder trial has once again garnered the attention of the national media.
Everything Crystal touches seems to draw a spotlight. There were cameras everywhere.
Crystal's supporters believe the single mother of three is being unfairly prosecuted, in part due to her notoriety following the Duke lacrosse scandal. Reggie in self-defense.
Crystal could jaywalk in Durham and it would be a major crime. That'll always haunt her.
But prosecutors have asserted the evidence in this case speaks for itself. That Crystal didn't stab Reggie in self-defense, and that her history of lies and violence proves she's quite capable of murder.
It sounds crazy that a premonition of something bad might happen to Reggie when he told me that he was dealing
this
with
was
this
an uncomplicated knife wound that
As
fully
this
should have...
case wraps up, defense attorneys make a bold and unexpected move. They claim that Reggie didn't die from Crystal's stab wound.
The ME testified this was an uncomplicated knife wound that fully should have been survivable. He should have absolutely been fine, and the fact that he wasn't certainly is a problem.
The defense introduces Reggie's medical records, which revealed that due to complications resulting from alcohol withdrawal, doctors had to intubate Reggie in order to help him breathe, which the defense claims turned out to be a huge mistake.
That resulted into him having a heart attack.
Blood flow was cut off to his brain.
Yes.
He went into a coma, essentially brain dead.
The argument incenses Reggie's family and friends, who believe either way, Crystal is still responsible for his death.
The bottom line is, Reggie wouldn't have been in there if you wouldn't have stabbed him. You know what I'm saying? And you're to blame. You're the cause for him dying. And that's the bottom
When they're out, you're hoping that
But when the jury retires for deliberation on November 21st, 2013, Crystal's defense team is hoping for an acquittal. But they worry that the jury is biased against her.
When they're out, you're hoping that they're listening to all the evidence, that they're not considering that this is the Crystal Mangum.
We just about got
After
this.
6 hours of deliberations, the jury returns with their verdict. They start with the first-degree murder charge.
They said not guilty. I said, okay, we just about got this.
But then the clerk reads the verdict on the second-degree murder charge.
They said she was guilty of second-degree murder. 18 years. She put her head back and started crying.
That same afternoon, the judge hands down his sentence.
He sentenced her to
I couldn't even sit in the
14
courtroom
years
any
and 2
longer. It was
months
all
to
open.
18 years in prison. And it doesn't seem like a lot unless you're the person who has to serve.
When that judge handed down that sentence, I couldn't even sit in the courtroom any longer. It was all over for me.
For Reggie's loved ones, the verdict brings a sense of both sadness and relief.
It was like a double-edged sword. I'm winning and I'm losing at the same time. It hurts. It hurts.
I wish that she would have gotten more time than what she got. It took somebody that really meant something to a lot of people. I just miss him a lot.
But while the pain, controversy, and questions still linger, there's no denying that the unconditional love Reggie Day so desperately craved led him into the arms of the wrong woman. A woman who seemed to leave a wake of violence and suspicion following behind her everywhere she went.
Reginald needed to be needed, and Crystal utilized that. He may not have realized how much she craved things and that he may not have had enough to give her to satisfy those hunger cravings inside of her.
18-year-old son named Joby, and a hard worker who ran a side business treating floors. He even taught children how to handle firearms safely. He was the kind of guy who made the world a little better just by being in it. My. You have a decent, honorable man, and then you have his wife, Karen. To the outside world, they were a happy blue-collar family who loved the outdoors. But behind closed doors, Karen was living a completely different life. She was swimming in methamphetamine and carrying on multiple extramarital affairs, even sleeping with the husband of her best friend. Danny despised her drug use. If he had known the full extent of her betrayals, he would have left her. But Karen did not want a divorce. She wanted a $50,000 life insurance payout and a clean slate, and she was willing to orchestrate a cold-blooded execution to get it. She began visiting a convicted armed robber named Larry Nolan in the Missouri State Penitentiary. Larry fancied himself in love with her. You have to be kidding me. A convict falling for a manipulative addict who played him like a cheap fiddle. She promised to marry him and pay him $15,000 if he arranged the murder of her husband. Larry reached out to a corrupt firefighter named James Cornhart, who recruited a man named Stephen Mueller and an unknown thug called Dozer for a miserable few $1,000s. These cowards lured a good man to a vacant house under the guise of discussing the infidelity of his wife. They beat him without mercy, and Stephen Mueller shot him dead. They drove his body out to that field and set it ablaze. They stripped the license plates, thinking they were criminal masterminds. But they left a matchbook with a cellophane wrapper at the scene. And on that wrapper was a single fingerprint. For years, the case went cold. Karen collected her blood money and immediately cut off all contact with Larry. She left him rotting in a cell. Hell hath no fury like a criminal scorned. Before dying of hepatitis in prison. And enraged, Larry confessed the entire pathetic plot to his cellmate, completely destroying the grand illusion Karen had built. By 1999, the Federal Bureau of Investigation heard the whispers and knocked on our door. We dusted off that cellophane wrapper, and the fingerprint matched James Cornhart perfectly. When the walls closed in, the rats turned on each other. Stephen Mueller confessed everything to save his own skin. Karen, realized that her web of lies had finally unraveled, pled guilty and turned state evidence, suddenly blaming her murderous heart on drugs. She claimed she was sober now and had a new perspective. I tell you, a sober snake is still a snake. Cornhart and Mueller were sentenced to life in prison. Karen received a 20-year sentence for her cooperation, 20 years for ordering the slaughter of the father of her child. It sickens me, but that is the justice system. We are still hunting for the ghost named Dozer, but we are patient men. Danny Coleman was an asset to this world, blindsided by the one person he was supposed to trust most. The fire that night in Stanton was meant to erase him, but all it did was light a beacon that guided us straight to the monsters hiding in the dark. Human beings are peculiar creatures. They kill each other for the most ridiculous reasons you can possibly imagine. You would think that after 19 years of marriage, a vow means something. You would think that building a life, raising a child, and sharing a home creates a bond that cannot be broken. But you would be wrong. Some people do not have a heart. They have a cash register where their heart should be. And when the math does not work in their favor anymore, they simply eliminate the equation. My. I tell you, my years of looking at the darkest corners of the human soul, the betrayal of Danny. Coleman is a textbook example of how greed and lust can turn an ordinary person into a monster. Let us set the scene. October 22nd, 1992, Stanton, Missouri. A motorist sees a fire blazing out in the middle of nowhere, a rural county. Just woods and empty fields. The fire department arrives, and they do not just find a burning truck. They find a tomb. Inside the passenger seat is a body burned almost beyond recognition. The fire destroyed almost everything. The license plates were gone. The perpetrators thought they were clever. They thought fire cleanses all sins. You have to be kidding me. Fire does not destroy the truth. It just makes us look harder. Investigators found the vehicle identification number etched right into the metal frame. Criminals always forget the details. That number led to an address in St. Louis, a 45-minute drive away, to a man named Danny. Coleman. Danny was 38 years old, an Army veteran, a mechanical engineer, a father, a man who taught children how to handle hunting rifles safely. By all accounts, Danny was a good man. A straight arrow who loved his family, worked hard, and even started a side business treating ceramic floors so people would not slip and fall. He spent his life trying to make things safer for others. He had no idea the real danger was sleeping right next to him. When police went to the house at 2:30 in the morning, they met his wife, Karen Coleman, and their 18-year-old son, Joby. Karen played the part of the worried wife. She identified the charred jewelry, the hunting belt buckled the watch. She even confirmed that Danny had a metal rod in his right leg from a motorcycle accident years ago. In Germany, the medical examiner, Dr. Mary Case, confirmed it was Danny, but Dr. Case found something else. Tremendous blunt force trauma to the skull, and later alleged snowstorm in the bone fragments. Danny was not just burned, he was beaten and shot. This was not an accident. This was a calculated execution. Why would anyone want Danny dead? We started looking at his inner circle. You always look closest to home. We found out Danny received a cryptic phone call at work the day before he was found. Phone records showed Karen made late-night calls to Danny's friend Rich Saluka at 1:30 and 3:30 in the morning on the night of the murder. Rich was cleared. He had a solid alibi, and he was genuinely devastated. But Rich told us something interesting. He said Karen was a rougher person than Danny. He hinted at marital problems. And as investigators dug deeper, the illusion of the happy Coleman marriage shattered completely. Karen Coleman was living a double life. While Danny was working honestly to provide for his family, Karen was sinking into the dark world of methamphetamines. She was using, she was dealing, and she was sleeping around. Danny despised drugs. He was an honest, clean-living man, a fixer by trade. He likely saw the cracks in his marriage and thought he could repair them just like he fixed machinery. He was blind to her malicious intent because he himself possessed none. But Karen did not want to be fixed. She wanted a payday. She wanted the $50,000 life insurance policy. She saw her husband not as a partner, but as an obstacle to her twisted freedom and a paycheck to fund her decay. The case went cold for years. Criminals think that means they got away with it. But guilt is a heavy burden, and secrets have a way of whispering in the dark. In 1999, the whispers turned into a shout from behind the walls of Missouri State Penitentiary. An inmate came forward with a deathbed confession from his former cellmate, an armed robber named Larry Nolan. Larry had died of hepatitis, but before he went straight to his grave, he spilled his guts. Karen was best friends with Larry's wife. She started visiting Larry in prison. She seduced him. She manipulated him. She used his desperation for human connection against him. She promised him $15,000 and her hand in marriage if he arranged to have Danny killed. Larry thought he was in love. He thought he was going to be a rich married man when he got out. I tell you, there is no fool quite like a fool in love with a black widow. Larry reached out to a friend on the outside, a local firefighter named James Cornhart. James agreed to facilitate the murder for $17,000. James then recruited another man, Stephen Mueller, for a miserable $1,200, and a mystery man known only as Dozer. Think about that. They took a good man's life for the price of a used car and some pocket change. It is absolutely sickening. On the night of the murder, they lured Danny to a vacant house under the pretense of having information about Karen's infidelity. Danny went because he loved his wife and wanted the truth to save his home. Instead, he walked into a slaughterhouse. They beat him. Stephen Mueller admitted he shot Danny 3 times. They drove his body out to a field in his own truck and set it on fire. But remember what I said about criminals making mistakes. At the crime scene in 1992, investigators found a matchbook with a cellophane wrapper. They pulled a single latent fingerprint off that wrapper and locked it in an evidence vault. 16 years later, when federal authorities finally gathered enough evidence to arrest James Cornhart, they rolled his fingers in ink. The print was a perfect match. 16 years of waiting, and the ghost of Danny Coleman finally reached out and grabbed James Cornhart by the throat. James was sitting in jail, panic setting in. He made a phone call to Stephen Mueller asking him to throw a homemade silencer built from a lawnmower muffler off a bridge. We listened to the tapes. We brought Stephen in, and he sang like a bird. He wanted the weight off his shoulders. The dominoes were falling, and Karen Coleman realized she was standing right in the path of destruction. Faced with federal charges, in 2010 Karen folded. She confessed to everything. She blamed it on the drugs, of course. Criminals always look for a scapegoat. She claimed she had a new perspective now that she was sober. But sobriety does not cure a rotten soul. She got 20 years in federal prison. James and Stephen got life sentences. Dozer is still out there, but let me tell you something about secrets. They do not stay buried forever. Danny Coleman was an asset to this world. He was a great guy who was completely blindsided by his loyalty and his love for a woman who viewed him as nothing more than a bank machine. He deserved better. He deserved a long life watching his son grow up. His killers thought they were clever, but in the end, they were just greedy, sloppy, and stupid. Justice took its sweet time, but it arrived. It always does. Humans are peculiar creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you can imagine, but beneath the complexity of their lies, it usually boils down to the oldest sins in the book. Greed, lust, pride. I tell you, you spend enough time looking into the eyes of murderers. You realize the devil does not wear horns. Sometimes the devil is sitting right across from you at the dinner table. It was a night of October 22nd, 1992, just after 9 o'clock. A motorist driving down Interstate 44 through the rural darkness of Stanton, Missouri, spotted a fire burning out in an isolated field. The Franklin County Fire Department responded to what they thought was a routine vehicle fire. But when they extinguished the flames, they found a body in the passenger seat. The fire was so intense, the vehicle was reduced to a blackened skeleton. But fires, you see, are funny things. Criminals think fire cleanses all sins. They believe it erases their mistakes. They are wrong. The victim was burned beyond recognition. No guoli, no identificación. Whoever did this removed the license plates to delay us. That is a conscious effort to obstruct justice. But they forgot one tiny detail. They always forget something. The vehicle identification number was still etched into the frame of the truck. That number led investigators to an address 45 minutes away in St. Louis, to a man named Danny Coleman. Danny was 38 years old. By all accounts, a genuinely good man. He served his country in the Army back in 1971, stationed in Germany until a severe motorcycle accident shattered his right leg. They put a metal rod in that leg to put him back together. After his discharge, he built a life. He married his wife, Karen, in 1973. They had a son named Joby in 1974. Danny worked hard as a mechanical engineer and even started a successful side business treating flooring to make it non-slip. He did not drink. He did not smoke. He spent his free time teaching children gun safety. He was the kind of man who carried the weight of his family on his shoulders without complaint. When investigators knocked on the Coleman door at 2:30 in the morning, they found Karen and 18-year-old Joby. They presented the personal effects recovered from the ashes: a gold chain, a ring, a watch, a belt buckle from a hunting organization. The family identified them through tears. The metal rod in the victim's leg confirmed the tragedy. Danny was dead. The investigation stalls. When a good man dies a violent death, you have to look at the people closest to him. The autopsy by Dr. Mary Case revealed the horrifying truth. This was no accident. The skull was crushed by severe blunt force trauma. He was beaten to death before the fire was set. We found a matchbox and a cellophane wrapper near the scene. Someone dropped in the dark. We pulled a latent fingerprint off that cellophane. We ran it, but we got no match. The ghost remained invisible. We looked at Danny's friend, Rich Saluka. There were cryptic phone calls to Rich from the Coleman house at 1:30 and 3:30 in the morning on the night of the murder. Rich was shocked. He cooperated fully. His alibi was ironclad. But Rich gave us a window into the reality of Danny's life. He told us Danny and Karen were having marital issues. We dug into Karen Coleman. My, the grieving widow was not who she pretended to be. She was living a double life. We discovered she was deeply involved in using and dealing methamphetamine. She was having multiple extramarital affairs, including one with her best friend's husband. Danny hated the drugs. He was a straight-laced man trapped in a marriage with a woman spiraling into darkness. But despite these revelations, we could not connect Karen directly to the murder scene. The trail went cold. Days turned into months, and months turned into years. The deathbed confession. Time is the enemy of a detective, but it is also the enemy of a secret. People talk. They always talk. Fast forward to 1999, 7 years later. The Federal Bureau of Investigation in St. Louis received a call from Missouri State Penitentiary. An inmate had a story to tell about a former cellmate named Larry Nolan, a convicted armed robber who died of hepatitis in 1996. Before Larry took his last breath, he made a deathbed confession. He said he helped orchestrate a murder. The victim? Danny Coleman. And who put him up to it? Karen Coleman. You have to be kidding me. Karen and Larry's wife were friends. Karen started visiting Larry in prison by herself in December of 1989. She manipulated him. She used her body and his pathetic infatuation to spin a web. She promised Larry $15,000 from Danny's $50,000 life insurance policy, and she promised to marry him. All he had to do was arrange to have her husband eliminated. Larry reached out to a friend on the outside, a stand-in firefighter named James Cornhart. Cornhart agreed to do the dirty work. Larry even arranged to have a silencer manufactured from a lawnmower muffler for Cornhart's pistol. Karen gave him Danny's schedule, but after the deed was done, Karen cut Larry off. She never paid him the money. She stopped visiting. Larry died angry and betrayed, pouring his heart out to his cellmate. There is no honor among thieves, and there is certainly no loyalty among murderers. The net closes. We check the prison visitor logs. Karen Coleman and James Cornhart were both on Larry Nolan's list. We had the medical examiner look at Danny's x-rays again. She found a lead snowstorm, fragments of bullets embedded in the skull, proving Danny had been shot, just as the inmate claimed. It took until 2008 to build a case strong enough for the federal prosecutors. On December 12, 2008, authorities arrested 49-year-old James Cornhart at his firehouse. They fingerprinted him. 16 years after a man was beaten and burned in a field, the science caught up. Cornhart's print matched the latent fingerprint left on the matchbox cellophane at the crime scene. Cornhart made a fatal mistake in jail. He made recorded phone calls to a friend named Stephen Mueller, asking him to throw away a gun. some ammunition, and a lawnmower muffler hidden at his house. Investigators squeezed Mueller. Mueller broke. Mueller confessed that he, Cornhart, and a third unidentified man, known only as Dozer, lured Danny to a vacant house under the pretense of discussing Karen's infidelity. When Danny arrived, they ambushed him. They beat him relentlessly, and Mueller admitted he fired the 3 fatal shots. They drove Danny to the field in his own truck and set on fire. Why? For a fraction of $50,000. Cornhart was promised $17,000. Mueller was promised $1,200. They extinguished a good man's life for pocket change. The cost agreed. When we arrested Karen Coleman at 54 years old, she finally faced music, facing conspiracy to commit murder for higher charge. The grand manipulator tried to save herself one last time. She flipped on the others for a lighter sentence. She admitted she wanted out of the marriage and wanted the insurance money to start a new life. Couple. Willie pointed directly to a woman named Daphne Wright, a friend of his uncle. Chapter 6. Unraveling the Web. Following Willie's confession, detectives focused their efforts on locating Bobby Guillory and investigating Daphne Wright. On December 16, 2015, investigators arrested 52-year-old Bobby Guillory at his home in Katy, Texas, on 2 counts of capital murder. Initially reluctant to speak, Bobby confessed after learning that investigators had a warrant to obtain his genetic profile. He expressed deep regret and fear, explaining that he had never been in trouble with the law before. He had been laid off from his job and was facing severe financial distress when Daphne offered him $10,000 to carry out the deed. Bobby confirmed that Daphne was the driving force behind the plan, motivated by the desire to collect the substantial debt owed to her. He also claimed that Daphne had obtained the key to the apartment directly from Chow Tran. Detectives then traveled to Houston to interview 44-year-old Daphne Wright. She lived a quiet life with her husband and 3 daughters, presenting herself as a professional spiritual advisor. While she admitted to knowing Chow as a client and acknowledged hearing about the deaths of his in-laws, she refused to provide details regarding their financial transactions. A search warrant executed at her home revealed detailed ledgers of her spiritual business. The ledgers showed that she charged clients sums ranging from $10,000 to $40,000 for various spiritual services. Chapter 7. Justice and Reflection. To build a strong legal case against the primary instigator, prosecutors made a difficult decision. They offered Chow Tran immunity from prosecution in exchange for his full and truthful testimony regarding the financial arrangements and the planning of events. With his attorney present, Chow detailed the immense psychological pressure the family felt under the burden of the debt. He claimed they feared spiritual consequences if they did not satisfy the outstanding balance. He also made the unusual claim that his mother-in-law had offered to sacrifice herself so the family could collect the insurance money to pay Daphne, a claim that investigators viewed with extreme skepticism. In August of the year 2019, the trial of Daphne Wright began. Chow took the stand, testifying about the heavy financial demands Daphne placed on the family and how he had left the apartment key under a doormat for the perpetrators. The defense argued that Chow was highly complicit in the scheme and was motivated by the insurance payout of $850,000, which went entirely to him. In September of the year 2019, the jury found Daphne Wright guilty of capital murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bobby and Willie Guillory also faced severe legal consequences for their roles in conspiracy. While the investigators expressed disappointment that Chow Tran did not face criminal charges due to the immunity agreement, the resolution of the case brought a sense of closure to the community. The trial highlighted the profound dangers of greed and the manipulation of trust. It served as a solemn reminder of the value of human life and the importance of seeking transparent, honest paths when facing life's greatest challenges. The story of Long Nguyen and Hong Lee began not in the sun-drenched, sprawling suburbs of Texas, But thousands of miles away, across the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean, for decades, they had lived a life defined by quiet resilience, surviving the turbulent decades of the late 20th century in Vietnam. In the year 2000, carrying nothing but a few cherished family heirlooms, their deep cultural traditions, and an unshakable belief in the promise of a new beginning, the elderly couple immigrated to the United States. They brought with them their 3 children, hoping to construct a sanctuary where the next generation could thrive. They chose to settle in Arlington, Texas, a bustling city in Tarrant County known for its warm climate and rapidly growing, vibrant Vietnamese community. The first major wave of Vietnamese immigrants had arrived in the area after the fall of Saigon in 1975, establishing a tight-knit, supportive enclave. Over the 80s and 90s, many more families followed, attracted by the excellent business opportunities, safe neighborhoods, and outstanding schools. Long and Hong studied the area carefully and realized it was the perfect place to build their legacy. To realize their version of the American dream, the couple established a commercial sewing business. They set up industrial sewing machines in a spacious workspace, where the rhythmic hum of needles piercing fabric became the background soundtrack of their lives. The scent of fresh cotton, steam from heavy irons, and the bright colors of various textiles filled their days. Because Long and Hong spoke very little English, they relied heavily on their 38-year-old son-in-law, Chow Tran, to help manage the operations. Chow was charismatic, energetic, and spoke English with a fluent ease that made him the natural face of the business. He negotiated with contractors, managed shipping schedules, and navigated the complex world of American commerce. For nearly a decade, the family worked tirelessly, pouring their sweat and tears into every garment they produced. Their dedication paid off handsomely when they secured a highly lucrative contract to manufacture clothing for a global entertainment giant, producing garments that would find their way to theme parks and stores associated with Disney. For a time, life was sweet. They bought comfortable homes, gathered for large family dinners on weekends, and watched their grandchildren play in green Texas backyards. Long and Hong were pillars of their community, known for their sweet, generous natures and unwavering work ethic. They had no enemies, never spoke a harsh word to anyone, and spent their free time volunteering or helping newly arrived immigrants find their footing. However, by the year 2011, the family's fortunes took a sudden, devastating turn. The global economy shifted, and the lucrative contract with the entertainment giant was lost. Almost overnight, the steady stream of orders dried up. The rhythmic hum of the sewing machines fell silent for days at a time. Bills began to pile up on the kitchen counter, and the heavy weight of financial ruin pressed down on the elderly couple and their family. In Vietnamese culture, when earthly efforts fail and a streak of severe misfortune strikes, many look to traditional spiritual solutions. For thousands of years, there's been a deep-seated belief in the power of spiritual harmony, ancestral blessings, and protective deities. When a family faces catastrophic challenges, such as impending bankruptcy, bitter divorces, or legal troubles, they often seek the guidance of a spiritual advisor to perform cleansing rituals, lift perceived curses, and restore the flow of positive energy. Hoping to rescue the sewing business from ruin, Hong Lee and her son-in-law, Chow Tran, began searching the local Vietnamese newspapers for a spiritual savior. 250 miles away, in the sprawling coastal city of Houston, they found an advertisement that seemed to answer their prayers. A woman named Daphne Wright advertised herself as a highly powerful spiritual medium. She claimed she could remove the darkest of curses, apply protective blessings, and realign a family's destiny to bring sudden wealth and good fortune. Desperate for a miracle, Chow Tran contacted Daphne. She agreed to meet him at her Houston home for an initial consultation. Accompanied by his mother-in-law, Chow made the 3-hour drive south. Daphne's home was filled with a heavy scent of burning incense, flickering candles, and elaborate altars dedicated to various mystical entities. Daphne herself was a commanding, loud, and direct 44-year-old woman who ran her household with an iron fist, leaving her husband, Howard, entirely subservient to her demands. Daphne performed an elaborate ritual for the family, promising that the dark cloud hovering over their business would soon dissipate. Hong and Chow returned to Arlington filled with renewed hope, believing that their financial salvation was just around the corner. But as the months rolled on, the business did not recover. Instead of advising them to cut their losses, Daphne insisted that the curse was far deeper and more stubborn than she had initially realized. She claimed that more intensive, expensive rituals were required to fully break the spell. Caught in a cycle of desperation and fear, Chow continued to pour family funds into Daphne's services. When the cash ran out, Daphne began offering her spiritual services on credit, keeping a meticulous ledger of the mounting debts. Over the course of a year, the unpaid balance ballooned to an astronomical sum, somewhere between $250,000 and $280,000. Daphne Wright was not a patient creditor, nor was she a typical spiritualist. She operated with the ruthless precision of a spiritual loan shark. She made it chillingly clear to Chow that those who failed to pay her would face severe spiritual and physical consequences. She insisted that she would collect her money one way or another. As the financial pressure reached a boiling point, Daphne discovered that Long Nguyen and Hong Lee held substantial life insurance policies, totaling at least $1 million, with Chow Tran named as a primary beneficiary. A dark, horrific plan began to take shape in Daphne's mind. She proposed that the only way for the family to clear their massive debt and escape the curse was for the elderly couple to die, allowing Chow to collect the insurance payout and settle his accounts with her. Chow would later claim that his mother-in-law, Hong, out of extreme despair and a desire to save her children from ruin, had suggested sacrificing herself. However, detectives would find this claim utterly absurd. Daphne, driven by pure greed, insisted that one death was not enough. She wanted both Long and Hong dead to maximize the insurance collection and guarantee her full payment to execute the heinous deed. Daphne turned to her acquaintances in Houston. She contacted 52-year-old Bobby Guillory, a man who had recently been laid off, was struggling to pay his rent, and was desperately trying to avoid living on the streets. Knowing his financial vulnerability, Daphne offered Bobby $10,000 to travel to Arlington and eliminate the elderly couple. Desperate and easily manipulated, Bobby agreed. He recruited his 16-year-old nephew, Willie Guillory, telling the teenager that they were going to head north to take care of a job. Willie, whose unstable home life left him feeling as though he had no other choices, agreed to go along. Daphne provided Bobby with a key to Long and Hong's apartment, which he had obtained directly from Chow Tran. The plan was highly calculated. Bobby and Willie were instructed to make the murder look like a random, violent burglary committed by local gang members. On the night of June 9th, 212, the family gathered to celebrate Long Nguyen's birthday. It was a joyful occasion, filled with laughter, delicious food, and warm family interactions. Long and Hong seemed happy and relaxed, enjoying the company of their children and grandchildren until about 10:30 in the evening. A family member drove the elderly couple back to their modest apartment, watching them walk safely inside. It was the last time they were seen alive. A few hours later, under the cover of darkness, Bobby and Willie Guillory used the key to enter the apartment. They spent the early morning hours staging a chaotic scene to mislead the police. They scattered compact discs across the floor, overturned lightweight furniture, and tossed personal items from drawers to simulate a ransacking. To firmly point the finger at local street gangs, they brought specific props, a light blue bandana, which they wrapped around an empty beer bottle, a plate of crushed prescription pills arranged on the coffee table as if ready to be consumed, and a partially smoked marijuana joint. When Long and Hong finally returned to their apartment or woke to investigate the noise, the intruders pounced. Willie ran toward the front door to block Hong from escaping or screaming, while Bobby grabbed Long, viciously beating the 70-year-old man with a blunt, heavy object. Once the elderly couple was incapacitated, the intruders dragged them into a small bedroom closet. There, they bound their hands and feet tightly with heavy duct tape. They then wrapped yards of duct tape repeatedly around the victims' heads, completely covering their mouths and noses. The perpetrators closed the closet door and slipped away into the night, returning to Houston. At 7:29 on the morning of June 10th, 212, Chow Tran placed a call to emergency dispatchers, requesting a welfare check on his in-laws. He claimed that his teenage son had gone to knock on the door, but received no answer, and that the family had gathered outside, growing increasingly worried after noticing an open window. Officer Weller of the Arlington Police Department was the first to arrive, seeing a large, anxious family standing outside the apartment complex, so early in the morning struck him as unusual. Upon entering the residence, he immediately noticed the signs of a messy burglary. He called out, but the apartment was dead silent. He searched the living room, the kitchen, and the bathroom, finding them completely empty. He walked into the master bedroom, which at first glance appeared unoccupied. As Weller turned to leave the room, his flashlight beam caught dark hand smudges on the wall next to a very small closet door. A sense of dread washed over him. Hesitating for a brief moment, he opened the door. Inside, he discovered the horrific sight of Long and Hong, tightly bound and wrapped in duct tape. There was blood splattered across the walls and carpet. Weller immediately stepped out to the living room, called for backup, a supervisor, and the crime scene unit. Detective Stewart, a seasoned homicide investigator with 21 years of experience, arrived shortly after. Even for a veteran, the scene was deeply disturbing. The medical examiner would later reveal that Hong's face had been wrapped in 25 feet of duct tape and Long's in 10 feet of duct tape. They had not died from the physical beatings, but from slow, agonizing suffocation. The physical evidence left behind initially pointed toward gang activity, specifically due to the light blue bandana. However, Detective Stewart and his team quickly became skeptical. The crime scene felt too staged, the gang symbols too perfectly laid out to be genuine. Most local gang burglaries did not involve such intimate, highly personal, and excessively cruel methods of murder. The investigation took a significant turn when Detective Stewart received a call from an insurance company informing him of a $1 million life insurance policy on the victims, with Chow Tran named as a beneficiary. Detectives interviewed Chow, who provided a detailed, seemingly airtight alibi. He claimed the entire family had been playing cards at his home until late the previous evening. He cooperated fully, providing fingerprints and genetic samples, none of which matched the evidence found at the crime scene. Detectives collected genetic material from the partially smoked marijuana joint left on the table. They ran the profile through the national database, but no matches were found. Because the database did not contain profiles of minors or individuals without felony convictions, the case slowly ground to a halt. For over 2 years, despite interviewing over 50 to 60 neighbors and family members, the trail went cold. The breakthrough came 3 years later, on October 12, 215. The Arlington Police Department received notification of a genetic match on the marijuana joint. The profile belonged to Willie Guillory. In the years since the murder, Willie had turned 18 and had recently been convicted of a felony for stealing a horse in Houston, which required his genetic profile to be entered into the national database. Detectives quickly tracked down Willie, arresting him initially for a parole violation to avoid tipping him off about the homicide. Investigation. When confronted with the undeniable genetic evidence, placing him inside the Arlington apartment, the young man broke down. He wept openly, confessing to his role in the crime, but insisting he was merely a pawn. He detailed how his uncle, Bobby Guillory, had brought him along, and how the entire plot had been orchestrated by a powerful spiritual advisor in Houston named Daphne Wright. On December 16, 215, detectives arrested Bobby Guillory in Katy, Texas. Faced with the reality of capital murder charges, Bobby also confessed. He admitted that Daphne had offered him $10,000 to commit the murders because the family owed her a massive spiritual debt that they could not pay. Most shockingly, Bobby revealed that Daphne had obtained the key to the apartment directly from victims. Son-in-law, Chow Tran. The puzzle pieces finally fell into place for the investigators. Chow Tran, terrified of Daphne's supposed spiritual curses and desperate to clear his massive debts, had colluded with her to sacrifice his in-laws for the insurance payout. Following the murders, Chow had quietly dissolved the sewing business, purchased a brand new home, and cut off all contact with the police, directing any inquiries to his attorney. To secure a conviction against the mastermind who had organized and funded the hit, prosecutors made a difficult decision. They offered Chow Tran full immunity in exchange for his detailed testimony against Daphne, Bobby, and Willie. On August 26, 219, Daphne Wright's trial began. Chow took the stand, portraying Daphne as a greedy, manipulative monster who exerted total psychological control over him, forcing him to comply with her demands. The defense fiercely attacked Chow's credibility, arguing that there was no physical documentation of the $280,000 debt, and that Chow had simply acted out of pure personal greed to pocket the $850,000 insurance payout. In September 219, the jury delivered their verdict. Daphne Wright was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bobby and Willie Guillory were also handed lengthy prison sentences for their roles in the conspiracy, though justice was served to those who carried out and planned the physical act. A bittersweet shadow hung over the police department. Because of the immunity agreement, Chow Tran walked free, leaving Detective Stewart with a profound sense of unfinished business. Yet, as a veteran detective closed the case file, he held on to the enduring belief that true justice operates on a higher plane, and that what is done in the dark will always eventually find its way to the light. Chapter 1. The Morning of 7/29. The summer air in Arlington, Texas, during the month of June has a way of pressing down on the earth early in the day, thick with the promise of relentless heat. On the morning of June 10, 2012, at precisely 7:29, the quiet hum of the emergency dispatch center was interrupted by a phone call. The voice on the other end belonged to 38-year-old Chow Tran, a Vietnamese immigrant whose words carried a heavy anchor of worry. He was calling to request a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, Long Nguyen and Hong Lee. The operator, accustomed to the varied cadences of a diverse city, listened carefully as Chow struggled to spell out the names over the crackle of the line. "My dad's name is Long," Chow explained, his voice trembling slightly. "Last name Nguyen. He is 70-something right now." Chow explained that his family had gathered outside the apartment. His teenage son had been sent to knock on the door, but the knocks returned only an empty, hollow silence. Through the window, they could see that things inside the home were not as they should be. The window was slightly ajar, and things seemed to have fallen down. Terrified of what they might find, the family chose to wait outside, praying for a simple misunderstanding. Officer Weller, a dedicated officer with 14 years of experience under his belt, was the first to arrive at the scene. He was a man who believed in the quiet resilience of his community, always ready to offer a reassuring word or a helping hand. When he pulled up to the apartment complex, the sight of an entire family standing under the early morning sun instantly signaled that this was no ordinary welfare check. It was far too early in the day for such a gathering, and the tension in the air was palpable. Entering the residence, Officer Weller kept his flashlight ready. He called out into quiet apartment, but his voice only bounced off the walls. The living room was in complete disarray, displaying all the classic signs of a burglary. Drawers were pulled open, items were scattered, and yet there was a strange, unsettling stillness to the air. He walked through the kitchen and checked the bathroom. Nothing. The only place left to look was the main bedroom. At first glance, the bedroom appeared empty. Officer Weller, focused purely on the safety of the family, began to turn around to leave, feeling a brief wave of relief that perhaps the elderly couple had simply gone for an early morning, walked to enjoy the cooler air. But as he swung his flashlight toward the exit, the beam caught something on the wall next to a remarkably small closet. There were smudges, handprints. A sudden, instinctual hesitation seized him. Every seasoned instinct told him that what lay behind that small closet door would change. Everything. Taking a deep breath, he pulled the door open. Inside the cramped space lay the elderly couple, bound tightly with duct tape. There was no breath left in them. In that split second, the gravity of the scene washed over Officer Weller. In his 14 years of public service, he had never witnessed anything so heart-wrenching. He stepped back into the living room, his mind struggling to process the scene, before gathering his composure to call for backup, requesting a supervisor and the crime scene unit. Chapter 2, The Veteran Perspective. Within the hour, the apartment was filled with the quiet, methodical movement of investigators. Among them was Detective Stewart, a veteran of the Homicide Division with 21 years of experience. He was a man who had seen the worst of humanity, yet he still maintained a deep-seated belief in justice and the ultimate triumph of good over evil. As Detective Stewart examined the scene, he noted the sheer violence of the struggle. It was clear that the victims had fought bravely. There were marks on the walls where they had tried to hold on as they were forced toward the back of the apartment. The living room had been thoroughly ransacked, with compact discs scattered across the floor, giving the initial impression of a robbery gone wrong. However, Detective Stewart's experienced eyes caught several anomalies. Resting on the coffee table was a plate with crushed prescription pills, as if prepared for consumption, along with a single marijuana cigarette. Most peculiar of all was a light blue bandana wrapped neatly around a beer bottle, left in plain sight. ++. Scene evidence log. ++. Item location description. ++. Coffee table crushed prescription pills on a plate. Coffee table 1 partially smoked marijuana cigarette. Living room floor ransacked compact discs and furniture. Near entrance beer bottle wrapped in a blue bandana. Bedroom closet extreme volume of heavy-duty duct tape. ++. In Arlington, certain local groups were known to use specific colors, and the light blue bandana resembled a calling card. Yet, the placement seemed almost too deliberate, as if the perpetrators were eager to claim responsibility or, perhaps, to point the finger elsewhere. Sometimes things seem too perfect. Detective Stewart mused to his partner. A robbery is usually quick and messy. This feels different. It feels staged. The loss of Long Nguyen and Hong Lee sent shockwaves through the local community. The couple had immigrated from Vietnam in the year 2000, bringing with them a deep love for their heritage, their 3 children, and their grandchildren. They had established a commercial sewing business in Arlington, hoping to build a lasting legacy. For nearly a decade, their hard work paid off, even securing a lucrative contract to produce garments for major commercial giants, including Disney. The neighborhood remembered them as exceptionally sweet, generous people who never harbored any ill will toward anyone. They were the very definition of the American dream, living quietly and working tirelessly to support their family. But by 2011, the winds of fortune had shifted. The major contract was lost, and the family business began to face severe financial strain. Chapter 3, The Seeking of Solace. In times of great hardship, people often look to their deepest beliefs for a way forward. Forlong and Hong, who carried the ancient traditions of their homeland close to their hearts. The string of bad luck felt like a spiritual obstacle. In many traditional cultures, when a family faces sudden bankruptcy or legal troubles, they seek the guidance of a spiritual advisor to perform rituals, clear negative energy, and invite blessings of prosperity back into their lives. Chow Tran, who spoke the best English and managed many of the business's external affairs, began searching for a solution. In a local Vietnamese newspaper, they discovered an advertisement for a spiritual advisor named Daphne Wright, operating out of Houston, approximately 250 miles away. The advertisement claimed she possessed a rare ability to lift heavy curses and restore good fortune to those in dire need. With hope in their hearts, Chow and his mother-in-law, Hong, reached out to Daphne. Chow made the long drive to Houston for an initial consultation, where Daphne performed a traditional ritual. The family returned to Arlington filled with renewed optimism, fully believing that their fortunes would soon turn around and their business would flourish once more. But as the months rolled on into 2012, the expected prosperity did not arrive. Instead, a quiet desperation began to settle over the household. The family continued to pour their remaining funds into Daphne's services, hoping that just one more ritual, one more blessing, would finally break the curse. Unbeknownst to many, the spiritual debt was mounting rapidly, ballooning to a sum between $250,000 and $280,000. Chapter 4, The Silent Investigation. Following the discovery on June 10th, investigators attended the autopsy at the Tarrant County Medical Examiner's office. The findings were deeply unsettling. While there were signs of blunt force trauma to the victims' heads, the medical examiner revealed that the true cause of death was suffocation. The perpetrators had wrapped Hong's face in 25 feet of duct tape and Long's face in 10 feet of duct tape. The sheer deliberateness of the act pointed away from a simple gang robbery. This was personal, methodical, and incredibly cold. As the detectives brainstormed potential leads, Detective Stewart received a routine call from an insurance company. It revealed that the deceased couple carried a substantial life insurance policy worth at least $1 million, specifically $850,000, and one of the primary beneficiaries was none other than Chow Tran. On June 13, 2012, detectives invited Chow to the station to discuss the family business and the insurance policy. Chow explained calmly that because the commercial sewing business was registered under his in-laws' names, the policy was a standard safeguard to ensure the business could continue to support the family if either parent passed away. When questioned about his whereabouts on the night of June 9th, Chow provided a detailed and consistent alibi. The entire family had been at a birthday celebration for his father-in-law. They had eaten together, played cards until past 10 o'clock, and then returned home. Other family members confirmed the timeline, leaving detectives without any immediate reason to suspect Chow. The police collected DNA and fingerprint samples from Chow, the family members, and various associates, comparing them to the evidence gathered from the apartment. Special attention was paid to the marijuana cigarette found on the coffee table. However, when the results returned from the database, there was no match. The DNA profile did not exist in the national database. For over 2 years, the case remained quietly on the shelf, a cold case that weighed heavily on Detective Stewart's mind. He refused to let the memory of the sweet elderly couple fade into obscurity. He knew that sooner or later, a single thread would unravel the entire mystery. Chapter 5, The Thread Unravels. In October 2015, the breakthrough arrived from the most unexpected of places. A young man named Willie Guillory was arrested in Houston for a felony involving the theft of a horse. Because a felony conviction requires the submission of a DNA profile to the national database, Willie's genetic signature was officially entered into the system. Within days, the system flagged a perfect match. The DNA from the partially smoked marijuana cigarette left on the coffee table in Arlington Back Inn, 2012, belonged to Willie Guillory. At the time of the murders, Willie had been only 16 years old, which explained why his profile had not been in the system during the initial investigation. On October 17, 2015, detectives brought Willie in for questioning under the guise of a parole violation. When presented with the undeniable scientific evidence, placing him inside the apartment on the night of the crime, the young man broke down in tears and confessed. "I was there," Willie sobbed, "but I didn't do it alone. My uncle, Bobby Guillory, told me to come help him with a job up in Arlington." Willie described how his uncle had obtained a key to the apartment, allowing him to enter without forcing the door. The plan, Bobby had explained, was to stage a burglary to make it look like local gang members were responsible. They brought along a blue bandana, crush pills, and beer bottles to scatter around the room. Willie had smoked a portion of a marijuana cigarette, accidentally leaving behind the very key that would eventually unlock the truth. ++, murder for hire chain. ++, Chow Tran / Hong. Lee owed $250,000 plus to Daphne Wright. Daphne Wright orchestrated plot and provided key. Bobby Guillory recruited nephew for $10,000. Willie Guillory left DNA on scene, age 16. ++, when the elderly couple returned home, the situation quickly turned violent. Bobby had subdued Long, while Willie attempted to prevent Hong from screaming. After incapacitating them, they bound them with duct tape, moved them into the small bedroom closet, and fled back to Houston. When asked why they would target a harmless elderly couple, Willie revealed the mastermind behind the entire plot, a woman named Daphne Wright, whom his uncle had met through mutual connections. According to Willie, Daphne had claimed that people owed her a significant amount of money, and she wanted them to pay up. She had allegedly told Bobby, "If they don't pay up, I want them dead." Chapter 6, The Final Pieces. Armed with this critical information, detectives traveled to Katy, Texas, on December 16th, 2015, to arrest 52-year-old Bobby Guillory. Faced with the reality of the charges and confession of his nephew, Bobby also chose to cooperate. He admitted his role, explaining that he had been laid off work, desperate, and struggling to survive when Daphne offered him $10,000 to carry out the deed. Bobby claimed that Daphne was a spiritual loan shark who wielded immense influence over Chow Tran and Hong Lee. When the debt grew too large to pay, Daphne learned of substantial life insurance policies. According to Bobby, Daphne decided that the only way to recover her funds was to have the couple eliminated so that the family could collect the insurance money and pay her back. Crucially, Bobby claimed that Daphne had obtained the key to the apartment directly from Chow Tran himself. In August of 2016, detectives executed an arrest warrant at Daphne Wright's home in Houston. A thorough search of her residence revealed a detailed business ledger. The ledger documented her spiritual services, showing that she charged clients $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, and even $40,000 for various rituals and curse removals. To secure a conviction against Daphne, whom they believed to be the ultimate instigator of the tragedy, prosecutors offered Chow Tran immunity from prosecution in exchange for his full and honest testimony. During the trial in August of 2019, Chow took the stand. He portrayed Daphne as a powerful, manipulative figure who had completely dominated his mind and actions, leaving him terrified of what she might do if the family failed to pay. Chow claimed that his mother-in-law, Hong, had actually suggested sacrificing herself so the family could collect the insurance money and clear the debt, a claim that investigators found highly implausible. Nevertheless, Chow's testimony provided the jury with a clear picture of the greed and manipulation that drove the conspiracy. On September 2019, the jury found Daphne Wright guilty of capital murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, while Detective Stewart remained frustrated that Chow Tran walked away free due to the immunity agreement. He took solace in the knowledge that the truth had been brought to light. The memory of Long Nguyen and Hong Lee was finally honored with justice, proving that even the darkest secrets eventually find their way into the warmth of the sun, leaving the community stronger, wiser, and united in the pursuit of peace. The threads of fortune. The morning sun over Arlington, Texas, always seemed to bring a promise of fresh beginnings, casting a warm, golden glow over the quiet suburban streets. In this corner of Tarrant County, the air was often filled with the sweet scent of blooming jasmine and the distant, comforting hum of neighborhood life. For decades, this city had been a sanctuary of hope, a place where families from all corners of the world came to weave their own unique threads into the grand tapestry of the American dream. Among them was a vibrant and close-knit Vietnamese community, whose members had spent years building businesses, raising children, and preserving the rich heritage of their homeland. At the heart of this community were Long Nguyen and Hong Le, an endearing elderly couple who had immigrated to the United States in the year 2000. They were the very definition of gentle souls, known throughout their neighborhood for their warm smiles, their generous hearts, and their unwavering devotion to their family. When they first arrived in Texas, they did not see challenges. They only saw opportunities. With 3 children to support and a vision of a bright future, they established a commercial sewing business. It was a modest endeavor at first, operating out of a small workspace filled with the steady, rhythmic click-clack of sewing machines. To help them navigate the unfamiliar business landscape of their new home, they enlisted their 38-year-old son-in-law, Chow Tran. Chow was charismatic, articulate, and spoke the best English in the family, making him the natural face of the company. He handled the contracts, spoke with the suppliers, and managed the day-to-day interactions with clients. For nearly a decade, their hard work yielded magnificent results. Their dedication to quality earned them a lucrative contract with global giants, including prestigious brands like Disney. It seemed as though their American dream had fully blossomed. However, the tides of fortune are notoriously fickle. By the year 2011, the lucrative contracts began to slip away. The steady stream of orders dwindled to a trickle, and the once bustling sewing shop fell silent. The family found themselves facing severe financial strain, watching their life savings evaporate. In Vietnamese culture, when hard work and dedication failed to ward off misfortune, many turned to the ancient traditions of spiritualism and mysticism. For thousands of years, people have believed in the power of spiritual advisors to lift curses, appease the gods of wealth, and restore harmony to a troubled home. Desperate to save the business and protect his family from ruin, Chow Tran, encouraged by his mother-in-law, began searching for a spiritual solution. In the pages of a local Vietnamese newspaper, they discovered an advertisement for a spiritual advisor based in Houston, some 250 miles away. Her name was Daphne Wright. She claimed to possess the extraordinary ability to remove bad luck, lift generational curses, and invite immense prosperity. To a family standing on the brink of financial ruin, she seemed like a beacon of hope. Chow made the long drive to Houston to consult with Daphne. In her quiet home, surrounded by the fragrant smoke of incense and the soft chime of ritual bells, Daphne performed a ceremony designed to turn their fortunes around. The family felt a profound sense of relief, believing that their dark days were finally behind them. Yet, as the months passed, the business did not recover. Instead of stepping away, the family became deeply ensnared in Daphne's rituals. She began to offer her services on credit, and the debt quickly ballooned. Before they knew it, they owed her an astronomical sum. somewhere between $250,000 and $280,000. A shadow in the morning. On the morning of June 10th, 2012, the peaceful atmosphere of Arlington was shattered. At exactly 7:29 in the morning, emergency dispatchers received a frantic call from Chow Tran. His voice trembled with anxiety as he requested a welfare check on his elderly in-laws. He explained to the dispatcher that his father-in-law, Long Nguyen, who was 70-something years old, and his mother-in-law, Hong Lu, were not answering their door. Chow, along with his wife and teenage son, had gone to the apartment, only to find the windows open and an eerie silence hanging over the home. An experienced officer, Officer Weller, was quickly dispatched to the apartment complex. When he arrived, he noticed the entire family standing outside on the pavement, their faces pale with worry. It was far too early in the morning for a typical welfare check, and the sheer number of family members gathered outside immediately signaled that something was. Deeply amiss, Officer Weller approached the front door and knocked, calling out into the quiet apartment. Receiving no response, he carefully stepped inside. The interior of the apartment was in complete disarray. Drawers were pulled out, compact discs were scattered across the floor, and furniture was overturned, presenting all the classic hallmarks of burglary. Officer Weller searched the living room, the kitchen, and the bathroom, finding no one. Finally, he approached the bedroom. At first glance, the room appeared empty. He turned to leave, but as his flashlight swept across the wall, he stopped. Next to a small closet door, there were faint hand smudges on the drywall. A sudden, instinctual hesitation gripped him. Every seasoned instinct told him that opening that door would change everything, yet his duty compelled him forward. He reached out, turned the handle, and pulled the closet door open. Inside the small closet lay Long and Hong. They had been bound with a massive amount of duct tape, their heads and mouths completely wrapped. It was immediately clear that they had passed away. Officer Weller, despite his 14 years of experience, was left momentarily speechless by the gravity of the scene. He stepped back into the living room, took a deep breath, and called for backup, requesting homicide investigators and the crime scene unit. When the veteran homicide detectives, including Detective Stewart, arrived, they were deeply shaken by the severity of the crime. Detective Stewart, a veteran with 21 years in the homicide division, noted that this was one of the most tragic scenes he had ever encountered. The physical evidence suggested a struggle had begun right at the front entrance, with traces of a physical altercation marking the carpet, the couch, and the walls. At first, the scene looked like a robbery gone wrong. To reinforce this theory, the perpetrators had left behind highly specific items: a plate of crushed prescription pills on the coffee table, a marijuana cigarette, and a light blue bandana wrapped tightly around a beer bottle. To the investigators, the blue bandana looked almost like a gang signature. Arlington had several active youth gangs at the time, and the color of the bandana pointed directly toward them. Yet, to an experienced detective, the scene felt almost too perfect, as if it had been deliberately staged to lead the police down a false path. The search for answers. The autopsy conducted at the Tarrant County Medical Examiner's office revealed a devastating truth. While the victims had suffered blunt force trauma to their heads, likely from a heavy object like a hammer or a bat, that was not the cause of their passing. Instead, they had suffocated due to the extreme amount of duct tape wrapped around their faces. The examiner noted that Hong's face had been bound with 25 feet of tape, while Long's face had been wrapped in 10 feet of tape. The sheer malice required to commit such an act pointed to something far more personal than a random robbery. As the detectives began interviewing the family, Chow Tran acted as the primary spokesperson due to his strong command of English. He told Detective Stewart that the entire family had been celebrating Long's birthday the previous evening. They had played cards and enjoyed each other's company until 10 o'clock at night, after which another family member had driven the elderly couple home. Chow claimed that his in-laws did not keep much money in the house and had no known enemies in the community. They were simply sweet, hard-working grandparents who kept to themselves. The investigation took a sudden turn when Detective Stewart received a phone call from insurance company. The representative informed him that the deceased couple held a substantial life insurance policy worth $1 million. When the detective inquired about the beneficiaries, he was surprised to learn that Chow Tran himself was named on the policy. Detectives immediately brought Chow in for further questioning. Chow explained that the insurance policy was established to ensure that the commercial sewing business could survive and continue supporting the family if anything were to happen to the elders. He cooperated fully, providing a seamless timeline of his whereabouts on the night of the tragedy. Every family member present at the birthday party backed up his alibi, leaving the police with no legal grounds to suspect him. The forensics team processed the staged items from the apartment, extracting a clear DNA profile from the discarded marijuana cigarette. They compared the DNA against Chow, the other family members, and the national database known as a Combined DNA Index System, or CODIS. To their profound disappointment, the results returned no matches, because the database only contains the profiles of convicted felons. The investigators hypothesized that the suspect might be a juvenile or someone who had never been arrested before. With no fresh leads, no fingerprint matches, and dozens of interviews yielding no new suspects, the momentum of the investigation began to slow. The months stretched into years, and the case eventually grew cold. For over 2 years, the file sat on a shelf, waiting for a single piece of the puzzle to fall into place. The lost thread found. The breakthrough came in the autumn of 2015, over 3 years after the tragedy. In a seemingly unrelated incident in Houston, a young man was arrested for a felony offense, stealing a horse. In the state of Texas, livestock theft is treated with great severity, and the arrest required the young man, named Willie Guillory, to submit his DNA to the state database. When Willie's DNA profile was uploaded into CODIS, the system instantly flagged a perfect match. His genetic profile matched the DNA found on the marijuana cigarette left at the crime scene in Arlington back in 2012. At the time of the offense, Willie had been only 16 years old, which explained why his profile had not been in the system during the initial investigation. On October 17, 2015, Arlington police officers apprehended Willie on a parole violation in the interrogation room. When confronted with the undeniable scientific evidence placing him inside the apartment, the young man broke down. He wept openly and confessed to his involvement, but he insisted that he was not the mastermind. He had merely been a follower. Willie revealed that in June of 2012, his 49-year-old uncle, Bobby Guillory, had convinced him to take a road trip from Houston to Arlington. Bobby had obtained a key to the apartment and instructed Willie to help him stage a robbery. Together, they had scattered items, left the blue bandana, the beer bottle, and the crushed pills to make it look like local gang members were responsible. Willie admitted that he had smoked a marijuana cigarette and left it behind, entirely unaware that he was leaving the key to his own undoing. When Long and Hong returned home that evening, the situation turned violent. Willie claimed that Bobby attacked the couple to subdue them, and then instructed Willie to help carry them into the bedroom closet. It was there that Bobby bound them with duct tape. When asked why they would target a harmless elderly couple, Willie delivered a stunning revelation. He explained that the entire crime was a murder-for-hire plot orchestrated by a woman named Daphne Wright, a spiritual advisor in Houston who was close friends with his uncle Bobby. Willie recalled overhearing Daphne telling Bobby that the couple owed her a massive amount of money and that she wanted them gone if they failed to pay. The mastermind unveiled. Armed with this critical confession, detectives arrested Bobby Guillory on December 16, 2015. Bobby, who had no prior criminal record, initially remained silent, but when presented with the evidence in his nephew's statement, he chose to confess. He explained that he had been in a desperate financial situation in 2011, having lost his job and facing homelessness. Daphne had exploited his financial vulnerability, offering him $10,000 to carry out the deed. Bobby painted a vivid picture of Daphne Wright as a commanding, manipulative figure who operated like a spiritual loan shark. She had convinced Chow Tran and Hong Lu that their business failures were the result of a powerful curse that only she could lift, as they fell deeper into debt trying to pay for her rituals. Daphne learned of the substantial life insurance policies. She realized that the only way to recoup her money was to ensure the policy was paid out, which required the passing of the policyholders. According to Bobby, Daphne had provided him with the key to the apartment. When the detectives asked Bobby where Daphne had gotten the key, his answer shook them to the core. She had gotten it directly from Chow Tran. Detectives immediately moved to arrest Daphne right at her home in Houston. During a thorough search of her residence, investigators discovered a detailed ledger. The book contained meticulous records of her clients, detailing charges of $10,000, $20,000, and even $40,000 for various spiritual services, including the placement and removal of curses. It was a highly lucrative operation built entirely on the fear and desperation of vulnerable families. To build an airtight case against Daphne, the prosecution made a strategic decision. They offered Chow Tran immunity from prosecution in exchange for his full, truthful testimony. Chow agreed to cooperate, explaining to the court that his family had been utterly terrified of Daphne's supposed spiritual powers, believing that she could ruin their lives with a curse if they did not pay their debts. Chow claimed that his mother-in-law had even suggested sacrificing herself so the family could collect the insurance money to pay Daphne off, a claim that detectives viewed with great skepticism, but which highlighted the intense psychological control Daphne held over family. In August of 2019, the trial of Daphne Wright began. Chow took the stand, testifying in detail about Daphne's greed, her threats, and how he had left the apartment key under a doormat for her associates to find. Despite the defense's attempts to portray Chow as the sole conspirator who wanted the insurance payout for himself, the jury was thoroughly convinced of Daphne's central role as a mastermind. In September of 2019, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on the charge of capital murder. Daphne Wright was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring she would never again prey on the fears of others. Bobby and Willie Guillory also faced justice for their roles in the tragedy, though the detectives felt a lingering sadness that Chow Tran did not face legal consequences due to his immunity agreement. They found comfort in the knowledge that the truth had been brought fully into the light. The memory of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu was honored through the pursuit of justice, leaving the community with a powerful reminder that honesty, compassion, and truth will always triumph over greed and darkness. The sun always seemed to rise with a particular kind of promise over Arlington, Texas. In the early years of the new millennium, the city was hummed by a quiet, industrious energy. Among the thousands who had come to build a life in this vibrant corner of Tarrant County were Long Nguyen and his beloved wife, Hong Lu. They had arrived in the year 2000, carrying with them little more than their treasured family traditions, a deep respect for their heritage, and an unwavering belief in the American dream. For Long and Hong, the journey from Vietnam had been a long, winding road. Like many who had arrived in previous generations, especially during the first great wave after the historic events of 1975, they found comfort and familiarity in the close-knit local Vietnamese community. Arlington had become a sanctuary where the old world and the new world met. Here, supermarkets smelled of fresh star anise and lemongrass, while the streets outside echoed with the familiar hum of American commerce. Determined to create a lasting legacy for their 3 children and grandchildren, Long and Hong established a commercial sewing business. It was a modest operation at first, filled with the steady, Rhythmic click-clack of sewing machines and the colorful cascades of cotton, silk, and polyester. To help manage the growing enterprise, they enlisted their son-in-law, Chow Tran, a 38-year-old who spoke fluent English and possessed a natural knack for business, communication. Chow quickly became the public face of the company, negotiating contracts, welcoming clients, and handling the daily operational details. For nearly a decade, their hard work yielded beautiful results. The family business flourished, culminating in a highly prestigious contract to manufacture garments for a global entertainment giant, none other than Disney itself. In those golden years, the family felt an immense sense of pride. They had woven their own success, thread by thread, proving that dedication and unity could conquer any obstacle. Chapter 2, The Shadow of the Curse. But fortune, as the old proverbs often warn, can be as fleeting as the morning mist. By the year 2011, the winds of luck had shifted. The lucrative contract with Disney was lost, and almost overnight, the steady hum of the sewing machines began to falter. Bills started piling up, and the once vibrant workshop grew worryingly quiet. In moments of deep financial stress, people often reach back to the oldest roots of their culture for comfort and answers. For generations,